Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If you would like to take your seats, for those of us who are able to join us in person at the Vancouver Convention Centre, and hello to everyone who is joining us online today. For those of you who don't know, my name is David Takanen, and I have the honor of being the president this year of MPI BC. So yes, this honor can be yours. Just come out to one or two meetings and this is what happens. Just a few housekeeping items before we start the program tonight. So the washrooms are just over to my left by the exit signs, you'll see them. The VCC has asked that we do not mingle and wander around with alcohol in our hands. So if you have alcohol at your table, if you're ordering using the online system, if you can just keep your drinks on the table. And then at the end of the event, we're inviting everyone to go into the Living Lab next door and just ask that you maintain social distancing while we're going through the Living Lab experience. It's been a while since we've been able to meet in person. So the last time that we actually were able to do an in-person event for MPI was February at the Weston Bayshore. And we've been doing a lot of things online. Board meetings have been online, and we've been doing a lot of events online as well. So it's great that we're actually able to meet back in person. And this event is really a demonstration event to show people that we can meet safely and responsible for business events. So thank you for being a pioneer, and thank you for coming to the event this evening. This event demonstrates the strength and the resiliency of our industry. We may belong to MPI, PCMA, ILEA, or we may have had to let our memberships lapse in our associations, but we're all part of the event community and we will all work together on its recovery. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, whether you're in person or online. Shortly, we'll be giving out our annual chapter awards celebrating those members' achievements this year that's had a lasting impact on our chapter. After the awards, we'll move into our panel discussion with our guests about the event's injury recovery plan and the release of the meeting and events safe restart guide. A copy of the guidelines are posted on our chapter website, and we'd encourage you to go to the chapter website. It's under chapter resources. You can download your own copy, read it, and if you're in agreement with it, we would like you to endorse it. And there's a place where you click on endorse, enter in your name, your email, the association you're a member with, and then press submit. So we would appreciate if you could do that today. After the discussion and the question and answer, we'll be able to experience the Living Lab next door, which is a collaboration between the Vancouver Convention Centre and Levy Show Services. I'm looking forward to experiencing this activation. So our event this afternoon could not happen without our sponsors, and we'd just like to thank our annual sponsors who support our chapter. Meetings Prince George is our annual sustaining partner. Loungeworks, our annual diamond partner. Gold partners are Effective Consulting, Foster Walker Gifts of Distinction, Spets Association Management, and Helijet. And our annual silver partners are NESCO Staffing Solutions and ePly Event Registration. Bronze members sponsors are My Badges and John Benjamin Photography and Vision Photography. We have some unique event sponsors this evening as well. So Tracy Bowden's got a heat scanning device. Tracy, if you want to stand up, from PC20. So if you want to see what you can do at your live events for checking people's temperature, Tracy would be happy to show you how that works. Internet sponsorship by Bell. Thank you, Bell. BBW for our safety ambassadors when you came in doing the health questionnaires. Audiovisual tonight is provided by Encore. And our venue and food and beverage sponsor is the beautiful Vancouver Trade and Convention Centre. Thank you very much. So we've got two little bit different sponsorships happening this evening as well. The first one is BBW. You might see a lot of their staff are wearing these face shields. And Lois is offering a special price of $14.95 plus tax for these shields. And if you want them for personal use or for an event. And if you choose to buy some from Lois, she's going to donate $5 from every purchase to the MPI Foundation. So it's a really great way for us to help give back to the MPI Foundation. So if you're looking to buy some face shields for your organization, please consider buying them from Lois, and you're helping MPI at the same time. Encore is also offering a special 2 scholarships to the MPI live experience, or the digital experience rather, for MPI Grapevine. And the details for MPI members on how to apply for that is on our chapter website. So they're offering this for 2 people for each Canadian chapter of MPI, which is great. So now it's time to move over to our chapter awards. And so at this point, I'm going to hand over the podium and the microphone to Heidi Hughes. And normally when the presidents kind of change the magic baton, they get to say a few words. And unfortunately, last year and this year is not like previous years. So it's been a little bit different. And just on behalf of the entire board, Heidi, I just want to say thank you for your leadership the past year. I know it's been crazy and different, but we've really benefited from the structure that you've put in place for us in helping to get our events organized. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Heidi.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much, David, for the kind words and the introduction. It's great to be here tonight as usual, and thank you again to the Convention Centre for being our host this evening. Normally, as David mentioned, this part of our event is done with a little bit more pomp and circumstance at the June Gala, but like everything else in 2020, we're doing things a little bit differently. When I stepped up to the office of the president 2 years ago, I never would have imagined leading our chapter together with the rest of the amazing board I've had the pleasure and honor to work with through such a challenging year. That being said, it gives me great confidence to have completed my unconventional term as president of the MPI BC chapter and to be handing over the reins to one of my most trusted and valued colleagues, Mr. David Ducannon, Tourism Marketing Program Head at BCIT. David has an amazing vision and commitment to ensuring that all of our chapter initiatives are relevant and current, of value to our members, both planners and suppliers, and to making sure that MPI continues to be a leader and a strong voice in the meetings and events industry. 2020-2021 is certainly going to be an MPI year filled with new adventure as we continue to roll with the constantly evolving meetings and events environment. I have no doubt that together with your strong board of committed VPs and their amazing committees filled with many engaged volunteers, you will continue, David, to deliver outstanding educational and networking events, create meaningful engagement opportunities for planners and suppliers, and take our chapter to new heights. I have a little present for you later that I will give to you in a socially distant manner. Before we get started with the Excellence Awards, I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge some members that have reached some pretty fantastic membership milestones. And I believe we do have a slide that outlines the 5, 10-year, and 15-year members, as well as one special person who's celebrating 20 years. That would be Melanie Cook of MGM Hotels. So it looks like we don't have that slide available quite yet, but we will put that up a little bit later. And we'll move into the awards portion of our event. I do have an award for each person that we're going to celebrate this evening, but again, we will hand those over to you a little bit later in the evening when we can do so in a safe manner. Tonight's first award will be given out is Planner of the Year. The purpose of the Planner of the Year Award is to recognize an individual member of the MPI BC chapter who represents leadership and excellence in the meeting planning profession or who has made an outstanding contribution to MPI and to the meetings and events industry as a whole. I am proud to announce that the recipient of this year's award is none other than the Vancouver event industry's own Mr. Alex Bickers, President and Creative Director of Reveal Events Group. Alex's own mantra, oh yes, applause. Alex's very own mantra is creating joyful experiences for others, and that is exactly what he does. His visionary leadership was instrumental in the creation and production of the Vancouver event industry's award-winning annual holiday celebration. He continues to set the bar higher and higher every year, and just when we think he couldn't possibly do anything more mind-blowing than the previous year, he does just that. Alex truly understands how to demonstrate the value of collaboration in bringing event partners and sponsors together to build an extraordinary event experience. Please join me in thanking Alex for his outstanding contribution to MPI and to the Vancouver events industry. Yay, yay, Alex. The next award goes to the Supplier of the Year. The purpose of this award is to recognize an individual supplier member of the MPI BC chapter who represents leadership and excellence in the meeting planning profession, along with a commitment to the local community and an exemplary record of customer service. Considerations include being a member of another industry-related association or organization, published articles, or speaking engagements, awards, and other professional recognition. Please join me in congratulating this year's Supplier of the Year, award-winning keynote speaker, engagement expert, and author, none other than Roger Haskett, president of Engagement Unlimited. Yay. Over the years, Roger has been a huge supporter of the MPI BC chapter. He has worked with us on countless events and initiatives, from top-notch emceeing to the most creative and successful engagement opportunities. Roger's devotion to our industry and to our chapter is inarguable. Roger brings an undeniable level of professionalism to any and every event he touches. As one member wrote in his nomination, thank you, Mr. Melville, the weekly positive videos he posts on YouTube and LinkedIn are helping the industry get through this pandemic like a boss. Let's give a huge round of applause to our good friend, Mr. Roger Haskett. Mentor of the Year. This is a really, really fabulous award. I love presenting this award. The purpose of the Mentor Award is to recognize an MPI BC member who has demonstrated an outstanding ability to inspire, motivate, and educate other chapter members. A member who has demonstrated openness with new colleagues and an eagerness to support their professional development. A member who creates a non-threatening environment to listen and educate members. A member who shares a range of experiences and encourages others to learn from his or her strengths, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities. A member who strives to build personal relationships and abides by a strong code of ethics. It gives me incredible pleasure and honor to award this to the founder of Vision Event Photography, Mark Kinskofer, AKA MPI's very own Friendly Giant, with this year's Mentor of the Year Award. To know Mark is to have made the acquaintance of not only one of the industry's most fantastic event photographers, but also one of the most personable and supportive champions of the MPI BC chapter. He takes enormous pride in building outstanding relationships, mentoring and motivating committee members and new members, and helping members make the most out of their MPI BC membership. Mark has been a very active member of the MPI BC chapter, serving in the past as our Vice President membership, and he continues to work tirelessly with our current membership committee and our entire board to grow our chapter membership and engage our members in a meaningful way. Congratulations, Mark. We're almost finished. Volunteer of the Year. The Volunteer of the Year Award recognizes an individual MPI BC chapter member who has demonstrated exceptional volunteerism to their MPI BC chapter and community through leadership, commitment, and dedication. A member who truly goes above and beyond, are passionate about their chapter, and have demonstrated commitment and reliability. The recipient of this year's Volunteer of the Year Award is another very recognizable face, the host of our incredibly successful breakfast club, the amazing and dynamic Lainey Collins of Nicola Wealth Management. This year, This incredibly challenging and what will be a historic year, Lainey stepped up big when our chapter needed to find a way to connect with our members face to face without being in the same room. The MPI chapter's weekly breakfast club became an online forum that conjured upwards of 60 attendees each time and brought our industry together to discuss the current crisis in a supportive, dynamic, and professional environment. Please join me in thanking Lady from the bottom of our hearts for her commitment to moderating our breakfast club and for bringing her own flair for fun to our mornings. Thanks, Lainey. Our future leader. The purpose of the Future Leader Award is to recognize an up-and-coming MPI BC member and future leader with his or her enthusiastic contribution to the chapter. This person demonstrates leadership ability and active involvement with an industry association. I am proud to announce that the recipient of this year's award is immediate past president of the MPI BCIT Student Club, Maddie Lemieux. Maddie recruited and led a dynamic and engaged board of student leaders. They conceived and executed a number of interesting events for the student members. Maddie was an active member of the BC chapter board last year and attended a number of our board meetings, all while juggling the crushing workload at BCIT. She brought her warm smile and infectious enthusiasm to all of the MPI students last year. She also successfully recruited her successor, Julia Dozen, and provided a strong footing for the success of the student club for the following year. Thank you, Maddie, for your contribution to the MPI, and I wish you continued success in your career. Rising Star. The Rising Star Award is presented to a chapter member who exhibits a strong sense of initiative on behalf of the chapter and the meetings and events industry during the current MPI year. The Rising Star of the Year Award is an award that is near and dear to my heart because the recipient of this award is someone who demonstrates an extra special sparkle and demonstrates outstanding initiative. I have the honor of presenting this award to an amazing person whom I've had the pleasure of working with on our board for a few years now, Ashley Lose-Fran. Over the last couple of years, it has been incredibly inspiring watching Ashley lead the charge of our chapter communications. Communicative, professional, and committed, she has taken our chapter social media to a new and more engaging height, kept our chapter communications with our members flowing, and maintained our website. This past year, she rose to the challenge when our chapter was needing to connect through a new medium to share their stories, their knowledge, their fears, and simply to see each other in the midst of a current global pandemic. Ashley, there aren't enough words to express how grateful we all are that you founded the MPI Breakfast Club. You are a ray of sunshine, and we are grateful to have you on our board and as part of our chapter. Thank you, Ashley. We can't wait for Breakfast Club to start up again in November. Last but not least, the President's Award. The President's Award is awarded at the discretion of the chapter president to an individual who has made an outstanding contribution in the meetings industry. Choosing the recipient of this year's President's Award has been a rewarding experience for me personally. Tonight is an honor to award one of the most driven, hardworking, and innovative event producers that we are beyond lucky to have serving on our board as our Vice President of Education and Events. Mr. Darren Dreger, Director of Sales and Events for BC Event Management. Since joining the MPI BC Chapter Board of Directors, Darren has been working tirelessly, often on his own personal time, to ensure the sustainability of the MPI BC Chapter. From creating and documenting systems, processes, and best practices on how we can better engage our annual and event sponsors, demonstrate value and return on investment, to integrate innovative event concepts and current event technology into everything we do. Darren's goal is to ensure that future boards will have the insight, tools, and knowledge to successfully take over the strategic planning and operation of the MPI BC chapter. Our chapter can count their lucky stars to have Darren as our Vice President of Education and Events. His ability to bridge communication gaps, inspire his committee, and motivate other board members to contribute to the planning and execution of events that ensure member satisfaction is second to none. Darren, it has been a pleasure having the R tonight, it's an inside joke, to represent you, to present you with this award. Thank you for everything you've done this year. And that concludes the awards portion. I'll hand it back over to David.
Thanks, Heidi. And for the award winners, we can uncover it now. Dun, da, da, da. They have beautiful awards up here, which they can come up and collect after the event. So it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for our panel this afternoon, none other than the great Shawn Cheng. A lot of people know Shawn. Now, I'm actually old enough to remember when Shawn was a student member way back when, over 10 years ago. So he's been deeply involved with the chapter, and he's also spread his love and involvement in the meetings industry over to PCMA, where he's serving as the current president of the Canada West Chapter. Shawn's a certified meeting professional and a certified digital event specialist. So please welcome to the stage, Shawn.
Hi, everyone. Am I on mute? That was a joke. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shawn, and I'm with MCI Group Canada, and I'm the current president for PCMA Canada West Chapter. It is my honor to be here today. Thanks, David, and MPI BC Chapter for the invitation. From a PCMA perspective, we just want to say we're really lucky that in BC and in Vancouver, all the association being very work collaboratively together. We really believe that, you know, one industry, one voice. So it's really my honor and pleasure to be here today and to moderate this amazing panel that we are going to have for the discussion. And for those who are joining us online, hello everyone, and if you can also give me a wave in front of your camera, I can see them. So let's jump right in. I think first of all, just want to give everyone a little overview of what the format will look like for today. All the questions of the panel today will be submitted and answered through Slido. So if you are in person right now in the room, please, there is a QR code in front of your table. You can simply scan the QR code and then that will direct you to the Slido page, or go to www.slido.com and then enter the event code, which is #September Schmooze. That's where you will be able to submit your question, and then also I will be able to see them, and we're passing on to the panelists. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Joanne Burns-Miller, founder and president of Pacific Destination Services. Joanne is the founder and president of the PDS, a Vancouver-based destination and event management company renowned for delivering award-winning corporate events, incentives, and meeting programs in Western Canada. Joanne founded PDS in 1998 with the vision to create destination-focused experience that reward, inspire, and engage corporate guests. While Joanne building PDS, Joanne also played high-level sports as Canadian national netball team athlete. During this period, Joanne not just grow her business, but also cultivate her capacity for teamwork and leadership within representing Canada in the sport in 2 Commonwealth Games and 3 Netball World Championships. How do you do that? Joanne is also a passionate advocacy for the tourism and hospitality industry. Joanne, during the pandemic, is a key driving force for the BC Meetings and Event Industry Working Group to drive response and recovery efforts during the COVID-19 pandemic. Committed to her professional and personal growth, Joanne is part of a CEO forum for Western Canada business leaders. Without further ado, let's welcome Joanne. Our next panelist also probably don't need too much introduction, but Dave Gaisley is the current Vice President, Meeting and Convention Sales and Services at Tourism Vancouver. Dave have led the meeting and convention team at Tourism Vancouver for over 20 years. The meeting and convention area is traditionally Tourism Vancouver's largest market investment, and Dave and his team all focus on bringing the highest value meeting and convention business to our destination. Over his career, Dave has been very active with industry involvement. For example, Dave was one of the original founding members of the PCMA Canada West Chapter. Dave also has a long history with MPI BC chapter. He helped lead the host committee for the MPI Professional Education Conference in Vancouver in '94 and '99. In 2010, Dave was the co-chair of the host destination and local host committee for the very successful World Education Congress in Vancouver. Welcome, Dave. Last but not least, Will Judas, current CEO at Tourism Industry Association of BC. Will has been involved in the tourism industry for more than 30 years, having worked at BC PEFCO, Port Metro Vancouver, and Tourism Vancouver, period to join the Tourism Industry Association of British Columbia, TIA BC, in 2015. As CEO, Will leads multiple advocacy files, sets the strategy course for TIA BC, builds relationship with members and industry stakeholders, and communicates the values of BC's visitors economy to various stakeholders. Before TIA BC, Will spent 15 plus years at Tourism Vancouver as Vice President of Marketing, Communications, Membership, and Sports. Welcome, Walt. So all three panelists today that we have, they are all deeply, deeply involved in represent and advocacy for the industry throughout the pandemic. Joanne and Dave are members of the BC Meetings and Events Industry Working Group and have been instrumental in the development of the BC Meetings and Events COVID-19 Safe Restart Guidelines. The guideline has been released this month, and so if you have not yet seen them, please go to the MPI website. I'm sure you will be able to download the file. And so today we're really fortunate to have all three of them in here, and I think let's just jump right in. Before we start, just one reminder again, please make sure to submit your question to slido.com. And let's maybe put the table to Walt. Maybe give us a little bit more high level on how TIA BC currently been working in terms for provincial or nationwide effort.
Good, thanks, Shawn. What a thrill it is to be in a room full of people that are friends and new friends. And the last time I spoke at an event was the BC Tourism Industry Conference in Victoria. Some of you were there. Think of that, feels like a lifetime ago, but we just slipped that event in before everything shut down. So I was very fortunate because that event alone generates 3/4 of our operating revenue. So we were very fortunate to have about 500 delegates there. I want to talk about three things. One, the advocacy work that we're doing. Secondly, I want to give you a very quick snapshot of what's happening in the industry. And the third thing is I'll talk briefly about the election. So these are among the issues that TIA BC has been working on right since the start. When COVID hit and things shut down, borders were closed, travel effectively stopped, right away we recognized there was an issue with liquidity. Businesses needed working capital to continue operating. Obviously, with no customers, there was no staff, no revenue, etc. Businesses were shutting down left, right, and center. Even if you were an essential service, you struggled to pay your monthly bills. So that's one of the things we've been advocating for. Secondly, the travel and gathering restrictions, which I'll talk about in just a couple of moments, and closed borders, that's a huge impact on our industry, as we know. We've been talking about government deferring taxes, fees, and other fixed costs that operators have. And the final thing that we've been looking at most recently too, given the province announced some recovery measures, as did the federal government in the throne speech yesterday, the relief program eligibility and the uptake. So let me give you a quick snapshot of what's happening in the industry. You know, being involved in tourism and hospitality for the last number of years, we've seen record numbers. And last year, $21.5 billion in revenue, but this year, our projections show that by year's end, we might be a $7 billion industry. That's a significant drop, and one that we need to pay attention to, and one that we're trying to get governments to pay attention to. But I like to look at it in a couple of ways. I get asked all the time by media, how is tourism? There was a bit of a misnomer that July and August, suddenly tourism was back. And frankly, it was, but I call it pockets and sectors. So if you were in Tofino or parts of the island like Qualicum, Parksville, maybe Comox and Courtenay, or if you were in the Okanagan, maybe even in the Kootenays, you would have seen many of the resorts full. You would have seen all kinds of people in restaurants, at the beaches, etc. That's what I'm talking about, pockets within the province. But, oh, sorry, go back one slide before I get to the next one. Sectors, some sectors performed really well almost from the start. Golf, by way of example, camping. Now, camping in certain parts of the province, not everywhere. But camping was another one that was very strong. Boating, I think they sold more boats this year than in the last 5 years combined. Nonetheless, there were pockets and sectors that performed well. However, on the next slide, the flip side to that, I don't need to tell anybody in this room that meetings and events was effectively shut down since March and is still really in dire straits and no prospects for opening anytime soon, other than some of the work that a whole group led by Joanne is doing that will hopefully see some traction. But cruise has been shut down. If you go to the next slide, you can see the revenue losses, and this will tell you who's performed well and who hasn't. Major attractions. While many are open, you know that some are shutting down. Vancouver Aquarium closed to the public. Capilano Suspension Bridge about to shut down for the fall months, open for a bit in December until early January for Canyon Lights, but most attractions have lost 70 to 90% of their seasonal revenues. This is peak season for them. Tour bus operators, as you know, almost 100% of their business effectively shut down. And then there's some sectors that you may not be familiar with, but they rely almost exclusively on international business. Guide outfitters, by way of example, bear viewing, whale watching. There has been some uptake in certain areas, but only for a prescribed period. If you look at July and August, sure, BC residents did some of those things, but you have to look at it from March right through to the end of December. And now as travel begins to wane, domestic travel is leveling off, people are back at work, kids are back at school, etc. No international traffic, these businesses are essentially shut down. Next slide. If you look at labor, we had over 320,000 people working on our industry last July. Now, there's a qualifier on that number. That's 320,000 people working within tourism businesses, but about half of them, or a little more than half, service the visitor economy. But you can see where it dropped to in April of this year with only 150,000. That's a loss of 170,000 employees. We've picked up again, but this also requires a qualifier for a couple of reasons. One, without the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, we wouldn't see anywhere close to this number back in the workforce. The other thing that is of note, these are people that are not going back to their regular jobs on a full-time basis. These are people that are lucky to get a few hours a week, very part-time in nature, and have no prospect of returning full-time anytime soon. So while this is good news on the one hand, we still have to be very cautious that this doesn't tell the story that tourism is back. Next slide. Final one that I'll just give you a brief overview on is the accommodation sector. You can see here the average expected occupancy for 2020 is 32%. That is dreadful. Hotels need at least 50%, as you know, to try to break even. And so if you're at 32%, there is a good prospect that many hotels won't make it through the year. I was speaking with a professional colleague a couple of weeks ago who checked in to the Hotel Vancouver. She was one of 9 guests. When you put that into perspective, in the city of Vancouver itself, the occupancy levels have been really, really low, anywhere from 10 to 20%. And places like Victoria haven't fared much better, but there again, there are pockets of the province that have done okay in July and August. But by and large, if it's 32% by the end of the year, there's some desperate businesses, to be sure. 40% of accommodators have recalled their team, 58% have not. But the interesting thing about this stat is that most don't expect to bring any staff back until next year. And you can see some of the other stats there, but let me go to the next slide before launching into some of the stuff that we're doing. So BC residents, this is really critical for all of us. BC residents are still concerned about welcoming visitors. You may have seen over the summertime mayors saying, don't come here, we don't want you. Some communities had signs out. But if you look at the last two, and I'm hoping you can see it, it might be a bit blurry or far away, but there is a stat here about people being somewhat concerned or very concerned about welcoming people from either the US or from other countries. That number is at 95%. So that's a confidence issue. People are scared to bring people, guests back into our community, and that's a big concern. So let's go to the next slide because it's a good segue. Among other things that we've been working on, we have suggested to all levels of government, we need international visitor traffic back. It's paramount to the success of our industry. As much as people traveled in July and August, domestic travel is not the panacea to save the tourism sector, by far. And as you know, there are agreements between premiers across the province. We're not encouraging travel amongst provinces. We're not dissuading it, but we're not saying to Alberta, our doors are open, welcome. But there is a group that has been working very diligently behind the scenes, sporadically, depending on what's going on with government, on reopening borders or looking at pilot projects or prospects to bring people in internationally in a gradual approach. So go to the next slide. You will see some of the tenets of that particular plan. One is about a slow and controlled reopening. Do this on a graduated basis. We're not saying open the doors and welcome thousands of people for non-essential travel now. Do it in a graduated way and bring people who perhaps are going hunting or fishing or in the back country. They can go into a rural or remote part of BC and never see anybody else but the guide outfitter or the backcountry lodge that they happen to be staying at. They won't come in contact with anybody from a nearby town, an Indigenous community, nobody but the people that they're actually working with or that are guiding them throughout that process. So they stay within their own bubble. They get tested before they come, while they're here, after they leave, so that we can track whether there is any transmission, whether there was any threat. And as a pilot, we would have federal and provincial health officers or health ministries monitor that program. And of course, it would be endorsed and with dialogue and support from Indigenous communities who are spread throughout rural and remote parts of the province. Go to the next slide. So one of the things that we've identified that I've suggested to the federal government and even to the province to a lesser extent is, what's the plan for reopening? How frustrating is it for you to know that a couple of days before the supposed reopening of the border, you hear it'll be closed by another month? It's almost better to know it's going to be closed till the end of the year, or even better still, find a date that we can say we're targeting March 1st to reopen international borders, and here's how we're going to do it. The problem is there's no plan, nor is there criteria been identified, but here's some things to consider. Is it based on the need for a vaccine, an effective vaccine that's in place? Could it be rapid testing, which, by the way, is being tested now in parts of the country, and you'll see a whole lot more of that in the coming days? What about the percentage threshold of COVID-19 transmissions? It looks like this is going to be around for a long, long time. So what are we willing to accept? Is that 0.1% of transmission cases, or what is that number? We just don't know. And what about looking at other countries and seeing just how far they've managed to either flatten the curve, eradicate, or dealing with some of these things and putting those same protocols in place? So that's something we're definitely pushing and hoping to resubmit a proposal to the feds and to the province at some point. Next slide. So you're familiar with these comments, I'm sure. Unfortunately, some of you are probably dreaming about them and dreading the day that you think back to when some of these comments were referenced by our leaders. And we understand why they did them. We're not being critical here, but this doesn't give us much hope for the meetings and events sector. Next slide. So what we did a few months ago, and a lot of you in this room supported that submission. There were over 200 names, and Dave was a leader, Joanne was a leader in getting people engaged in submitting a proposal to the province about ways and means to be able to extend beyond the 50-person gathering limit and perhaps open our sector under the right health and safety protocols. So a couple of these considerations. One, let's review this every 30 days instead of saying it's indefinite. And secondly, using space configuration models like we have here today. And I think I was saying it to either Dave or somebody, look at the size of this place. We could have 3-4 times as many people in here and still social distance and practice all the health and safety protocols. There's not the appetite for it now, but it can be done, and we're a demonstration of that. Next slide. So what we learned most recently, though, is there may be some wriggle room there to perhaps resubmit a proposal, and the work is being done by Joanne, and I'll allow her to speak to that. But under Section 43 of the Public Health Act, we may be reconsidered if we have additional relevant information that wasn't available when the order was issued, and a couple of other things that you see. In the interest of time, I'm going to leave that to Joanne. But go to the next slide. All that to suggest is there may be a sliver or a window of opportunity, if not by the end of the year, then certainly at the start of next year, but it largely depends on so many different variables. As you know, TIA BC and 40 sector associations on behalf of industry submitted recovery funding requests, stimulus funding for $680 million to help our sector. You heard the announcements last week that the province made. If you go to the next slide, these are some of the elements that they included for tourism. One of the questions I get all the time, are you disappointed you got $100 million? You asked for 680. Well, it was an ambitious ask to be sure, and it was quite aggressive. But the fact that tourism was singled out as an industry is a recognition at the government level, provincially, and yesterday you heard it mentioned in the Throne's speech that we are a desperate industry and we need help for all the reasons that we've talked about. So this is what the government introduced. I'm sure you're well familiar with it. But let's go to the next slide. We have, right in the middle of a pandemic, almost unheard of. None of us have dealt with a pandemic before, and right in the middle, we've got an election, and it's a very short window. So what I'm appealing to all of you, and I'll leave you with this, is we need to all be engaged. We need to ask the candidates in our communities, in candidate forums online, when you're calling into a radio show and you hear somebody, ask them the questions that relate to our industry. So here's one. How would you support tourism and hospitality if your government is elected? Or will you commit to working with the federal government on a process to safely reopen international borders? Just two of probably 100 questions that you have that we have. And if you like, we're putting together an election toolkit as TIA BC that will forward to all of you that you can use when you're meeting with your candidates or talking to candidates, whatever forum that you choose. but feed me some questions because I'd love to include that in that package. That'll be a tool that you can use, and we want to make sure that tourism is a significant part of each party's platform, and particularly the ones that get elected. So with that, thanks very much. I look forward to the Q&A.
Thanks, Walt. So next, let's move on to Dave. I think Walt gave us kind of a rough idea on what the high-level advocacy we've been doing with the government. I think it would be really interesting to hear from Dave about what Tourist Vancouver has been doing in terms of marketing.
Good. Thanks a lot, Shawn. And I did want to take a sec, and not that Walt and I worked together for 10 years and a tremendous person to work with, but I do want to thank him. I don't think TIA gets the recognition it deserves in terms of the work they've done on behalf of our industry, on behalf of the entire tourism and hospitality industry across the province. And Walt has made sure that the meetings and events industry is part of that conversation. He has done that consistently. So thank you, my friend. It's really appreciated. Full disclosure, when Nicole's been tremendous help in prepping for today, but I ended up with way more slides than I thought I would show. So I'm going to go pretty quick. First one we talked about was Nicole asked me to share a little bit about what Tourism Vancouver is doing on the marketing front, as Shawn just said. Then we'll get into little stuff on the meetings and events side. But being the organization that we are, you know, we love to show videos. We love to create new videos. And Nicole had the reaction to this video that I love. But I'll just run the video, David, if you just click it a couple times there. That's the reaction we want. And Nicole was so cute on the phone yesterday. She said she's seen that video, I don't know, 10 times and still get you here. So we've done our job, hopefully. So a little bit about the campaign. It's a Vancouver Comeback campaign is how we framed it. Very proud of my colleagues who did all the work on this, led by Candace Gibson, our manager of marketing. But microsite, one of the things that it sounds very simple, and Walt alluded to all the challenges our members are having. Tourism Vancouver is, after all, a membership-based organization. And many of our members, we didn't know who was open, who wasn't. So we want to make sure there was one place where a potential visitor or local could go and see what's open so they knew what they could go out and do in their communities. Safe messaging, all about that. Social, digital, radio, PR, Instagram contest, all the things you see there. The hotel offer, we have a very good and strong partnership with the Vancouver Hotel Destination Association. They put a good chunk of change into a hotel offer to make packages for folks to get out, come downtown, experience the city. We did a really good shift on the Dine Out program. Hopefully everybody in this room has gone and supported Dine Out over the many years. I think it's now 20 years we've been doing the Dine Out Vancouver program, traditionally in the last week or so of January and into early February. With what the city did on the patios this year, we thought it was a natural to do a dine outside program. So that ran for a month. I'll probably got another slide on that one, August 21 to September 21. And one of the biggest things about our city, why Vancouver is truly an international successful city, is the percentage of people who do take public transportation. That's a great thing for a city that's growing and is on the world stage. And we want to make sure people were safe, felt safe using transit. And we did a partnership with TransLink to get a little bit of that messaging going. And I take Canada Line most days now, very comfortable. Everyone's really good about wearing masks and feeling safe and comfortable. David, thanks. A little bit on the visuals for what we did in the Vancouver Comeback campaign. As I said, social, digital, earned media, paid media, some advertising that we did, give you a look and feel of the campaign. And the TransLink partnership that we did. We did a little safety pack when the campaign first came out, which was great. And then Dine Outside Vancouver, and really proud of my colleagues, especially Lucas Pavan, who runs this program for us. Dine Out's an interesting case study on branding, and that most people don't know Tourism Vancouver still runs the program because it's got its own such strong brand, which is a great thing. So a natural progression when the city opened up the patios for all of us and started utilizing that outdoor space, that we could do a dine outside program over that summer month to get people out and about. Really well supported by our restaurant members, 160, and again, some great hotel packages that were part of that. Also did on a national scale a program with Air Canada, and that was about bringing people from across the country, some specials we had with Air Canada. We hijacked their website for a while with a real Vancouver message, and almost 3,000 tickets were sold, so not too bad at all. So results, I get you to look at the top line first and give you a bit of the progression of how we felt we could do marketing on behalf of the destination, and very much in line with what Destination BC is doing and what Destination Canada is doing as well. I didn't put it on there, but there was a term coined early on called hyperlocal to really literally get me off my butt, out of my house, and go out into my community and do something in the early stages of COVID. The video came out June 11th, but we were ramping up to that. So hyperlocal would be, I live in Richmond, so go into Steveston. If you live in the North Shore, maybe Lower Lonsdale. If you live around Commercial Drive, just get out and do something hyperlocal. And the local expansion was Metro Vancouver. Regional, obviously, the sort of the triangle of Victoria, Whistler, and Vancouver is where the marketing was. And then interprovincial within the province. And really the only interprovincial was Alberta. And then the national program was with Air Canada. So for a very modest budget and a reduced staff complement that worked on this, I thought we got some pretty good results there. David, thanks. Now switch gears a little bit over to the meeting convention team at TVAN and what we've been up to there. As with many of our members, our partners, organizations we work with, it was a really difficult summer for us. And we had to make some really challenging decisions, as many organizations have. As a company, we've gone from 62 full-time staff members down to 29. And our M&C team, its full complement pre-COVID, 19 full-time staff members and 5 contract folks that are really part of the team as well. So going from 24 down to 7. So these are my wonderful colleagues as part of TVAN that are your DMO representatives in the M&C world. My wonderful colleague Owen is here today. Good to have her here. And this is the team going forward. David? This is a question that we get asked many times. Claire's had this question a million times. I've had it a million times. What's the value of meeting convention business to Vancouver as a destination? And traditionally, we're hesitant to answer that because there's so much stats that go behind it. But the last couple of years, we've done some really detailed and disciplined survey work at YVR. And the results were very consistent. You look at 2019 results there, very similar to 2018. Over 11 million visitors that came to Vancouver, overnight visitors. Of that group, 5% self-identified in the survey work that they came for a meeting, a convention, or a conference. So even I can do that math, 550,000. The model we use to calculate economic impact, we believe the strongest one out there is Destinations International, their event impact calculator. When you run the numbers on that, it's $1 billion industry. I still think that's really conservative. When you add induced and indirect spending, it goes up to 1.6 billion. So that's a figure we can really stand behind as to the value of meeting convention business for Vancouver, but it doesn't include everything, that's for sure. I think that figure is bigger for sure. In terms of what our organization touches, in terms of going through our CRM, anywhere from 10 to 25% in a given year, we would touch directly. 11,000 full-time jobs, and I think that number is one we can stand behind for sure. Next slide. This is a slide I don't really like showing, but it is unfortunately our reality this year. And that's the cancel business that we've all had to deal with, postpone business, move business, et cetera. So close to 200 groups this year. This is just the Tourism Vancouver CRM. Obviously, in the community, there's other business that has had to make difficult decisions as well. 27 of those, 193 being major citywide conventions that would have had a tremendous impact on the city this year. And that's an incredible shame. When you run that same economic impact model for those, over 200 million direct sales and almost 350 million in total sales that has evaporated this year. So we decided early on, Owen, our colleagues, working really closely with the Convention Centre team. And by the way, compliments to Claire and the team. They have been unbelievable in how they've layered the books, how we've taken business that was canceled this year, tried to fit it in for future years whenever we can. Keep in mind, this is an incredibly successful convention center and it's a busy one. So trying to fit those groups in over the future years, they've done a great job of that, Claire and the team. So we're at about 70, yes, thank you. Katie, Stephanie, Brian, and Lynn, all of them working really closely with our team and making sure they maximize the space here, absolutely. The lead pace, sorry, I skipped that number, 75%. That's our conversion ratio on the citywides that we had an opportunity to rebook. So we're pretty proud of that number, making sure that 3/4 of them are going to come back in a future year. We worked our asses off, am I allowed to say that online? Sorry. We worked our butts off to book them as a community, and we don't want them going anywhere else. We want them coming back to Vancouver in the appropriate year. Lead pace is not down as much as I thought it would be, 36% year to date. I thought it would be higher, but you run the numbers and we're sitting about 36% down. Market segments, excuse me, market segments is a question that I get. Markets geo, market segments, and market vertical. Is Tourism Vancouver, given the current situation, going to abandon any markets, give up on any markets? The short answer is no. The longer answer is the Canadian market, the international market, and the US market are all fundamental to Vancouver's success going forward, and they will all come back. Obviously, we'll do more in Canada in the short term for sure. The same on market segments, sorry, David. The same on market segments, association, corporate. I do worry about the incentive market. I know Joanne is living proof of that, and her and her team do an incredible job, as do our other DMC partners. I am worried that might take a little longer in terms of the market segments that we go after. The verticals are the ones that we focus on now as the high yield verticals, the verticals that we think will come back quicker, be in a stronger position to meet and spend money, pharmaceutical, insurance, and finance, engineering, scientific, et cetera. Those vertical sectors we think we can go after in the short stages of a COVID comeback. Okay, the Convention Centre team's not allowed to answer this question, but what function is that from? Sorry, David. Thank you. It's the opening general session of PCMA. Okay, so nobody in this room can show that picture to Bonnie Henry. We cannot show that picture to her and have meetings and conventions or events in the same sentence. But that's how we used to do business for the next while. David, the next slide. We're going to look more like that. And again, kudos to the Convention Centre. We knew today's setup would be incredible with all the partners, the AV and the sponsorship today. But this is our reality for a while. So everything's changed in terms of our sales activities, things that happen in market, now virtual, things that happen in destination sites and FAMs. Although this week was a good one. We did have a FAM. Joanne and I are on the business advisory group for Destination Canada, and they did do a FAM this week, which was tremendous. Whistler, Victoria, and they were in Vancouver yesterday, a real live FAM. But everything is now virtual. At first we were really hesitant. Owen, Jackie, and Lacey have all done stuff in the US, and they've been pretty good. We've got a good degree of awareness and presence for Vancouver virtually, so we're okay with that. But it's been better than we thought. We've had to redo all of our industry partnerships. Most of them were based on face-to-face interaction, all of our activations. So we've had to reimagine and renegotiate and redo all of those. Our MIND program, I wish this had more, I wish we had if we had an unlimited budget, we'd spend way more on marketing our MIND program. That is our local ambassador program. The industry experts and leaders locally in Vancouver and BC and across Canada that help us bring international conferences to town. That program is a little quiet right now, but it's not going away, absolutely not. That's one we do in very close partnership with the Convention Centre. And I'll share a little bit about the MNC brand work in a second. Okay, Canadian market, absolutely a priority to Vancouver, always has been, always will be, now more than ever as we know, because it's our target market probably for the next 18 months as far as realistic MNC business. Current lead scale, you see that there. Michael Drake and Michelle Taylor working with all those industry organizations for Vancouver activations virtually. We're hoping we might be able to do a couple live in market before the end of the year, but we're not quite sure about that. Working closely with the Canadian third parties to let them know that Vancouver's their partner for their clients. And Owen and Michelle working on just the demo of a virtual site inspection template. And so that we're going to work on as well. We were really fortunate to have CSA in Vancouver last October. Sheraton Wall Centre did an incredible job. The Convention Centre did an incredible event in this room right here. And we got it off in October. Then we hosted the site conference in the JW Marriott in January. Fortunate to get that one off before COVID. JW Marriott doing a great job there. The reason I put the site one as part of the Canada slide, even though SITE, Society for Incentive Travel Excellence, is a global organization, the Canadian members of SITE, especially in Ontario, that event wouldn't have come here without their support, and we still want them to continue supporting and booking Vancouver in the future. Next one, Dave. Thanks. International market, again, fundamentally important to Vancouver. it's going to be a while before it's back as to what it was before. We all know that. We had some great news last year in terms of Vancouver's rankings with ICA and current lead pace. Stephanie at the center and Michael and Michelle and our team are working on several international bids for future years. It's happening, folks, for sure. I do want to compliment again our IAPCO members here in town, Venue West, John and Matthias with ICS, and then Natasha with MCI Canada. Without them, the IAPCO General Assembly would not have happened in Vancouver in February, and the Convention Centre hosted it. And again, it was right before COVID. We were lucky to have those world leaders in town that represent the international PCO community. And again, a great event for us. And luckily, we got it in before everything shut down in March. The US, I don't know what to say sometimes. I can't watch the US news. I don't know about you guys, but it's really difficult to watch the news coming out of the US right now. I asked Jackie just for a couple of quick slides as our director of sales for the US market. And everything, it's 24/7 politically motivated, everything you see right now. So it's a real challenge to get some decisions made in terms of the US market right now. But she did share a few trends. I'm not going to read through all those. I think Nicole said we can share this presentation afterwards if you want it. What I like is the very bottom on that trend list is from clients saying a desire to work with informed and forward-thinking destinations. I think Vancouver ticks that box, BC ticks that box, Canada ticks that box. So I think we have a competitive advantage over other areas of the world because we've handled this crisis better than most. But we got to be very careful. We can't say that we're better than in Germany or Hawaii or anywhere else, but we got to figure out how we take that to market and ensure clients, as they start to make decisions, when they are ready to meet, that they know Canada and Vancouver and BC are a great place to do that. Just a list of some of the groups that we're working in the US market with, all the alphabet soup of our wonderful organizations that we do industry partnerships with. Many of those things are all happening virtual right now. And Owen and Lacey and Jackie participating on behalf of all of you on behalf of Vancouver. Would never want to forget about our convention service team. You saw on the very first slide, Sue Graham, who takes care of the convention services for us and for all of you as a destination. She is probably the most productive person on the planet, as Owen will attest to. All the things we would do as a convention service organization, we are still doing, absolutely. And a couple really cool things Sue has been able to do is the virtual exhibit and trade show booth. We were skeptical about it at first, but she did a demo and showed a couple to us, and it worked quite well. As much as I hate to admit it, we'd love to do this live and in person with people, but she showed a couple and they were really, really well done. We're going to use probably a version of that potentially for our site inspection template, I believe. Yeah. That's another version of one we did. Okay, I've got a bunch of slides on this that I'm not going to show, but I encourage you to read them because it is worth reading. And Claire, I'll ask you to jump in here, please, if you want to. This is about our brand, the MNC brand within the overall Vancouver destination brand. I know all of you know a couple years ago we went through a really, really detailed process of redoing the Vancouver destination brand. MNC was always part of that, but we wanted to have our own version thereof. So I will read that because I want to make sure I say it the way I wanted it to be said. The Vancouver meeting and convention experience perfectly aligns with the Vancouver destination brand, yet can be defined in so many ways relevant to so many clients and audiences, unique clients and audiences. I say this has always been one of our biggest strengths because we have an incredible product in Vancouver that meets the requirements and the needs of so many clients, and yet it's a challenge to get that message across in a consistent way. And I think the company that we worked with this on, Will Creative, did a fabulous job. We had an advisor group that Claire was part of, and I think they've done a great job capturing it. I won't go through it, but if you roll those slides just quickly a little bit, David, you'll see the wording that we've used. And I encourage you to read through that in the follow-up to the presentation today. Just some of the audiences that we're targeting, actual delegates that would come for an event, decision makers that are going to decide if they choose Vancouver, incentive markets, the last one there. And we feel they've done a really, really good job. Thanks, David. Oh, sorry, you're too quick. There was a delay there before. So preface this video, Nicole and I looked at both and we decided to show both. The first one was June 11th. This one was just in the last month. You'll see an evolution of the feel and look of the video that really get people out. We're in a COVID world. Okay, let's deal with it, but let's still get out and see our city.
can control it. Where you are, where you are, where you go, where you go. Promise I will be there. I will be there. You make me feel something more stronger, something that I may never forget. I just want this to be longer, longer, longer. Where you are, where you are, where you go, where you go. Promise I will be there. I will be there.
One last thing, Shawn. Shawn gave me way more credit when it came to the BC Meetings in Advance Working Group file. That credit deserves right there with Joanne. And she's going to talk about that today. But you guys got to know, she's done this as a private sector operator representing our industry, and she has spent countless hours, days, and weeks doing this for the greater good of the industry. So a great example of why we love our industry.
Just to counter that, Dave, thank you very much. But I would say the same thing to both of you. It's been an honor and a privilege, Walt, to meet you and get to know you and have somebody who I've never worked with before. And I don't know if many of you have. MPI BC typically has not we haven't had a strong voice as the meetings and events industry within many associations except for our own. Which I really did identify as an issue, but you have stepped up to the plate and been our voice and been our advocate in direct conversations with the government. And we've gotten some traction on that, which I would just like to acknowledge, from wage subsidy to rent subsidies, all of those things, despite the fact that there was a lot of efforts made in many industries. Walt was spearheading that campaign, and I know my business wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for those subsidies. So from the get-go, out of the gate, Walt has been a true advocate for the meetings and events industry, and I thank you so very much. And Dave Gaisley got voluntold that he was going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting to rebuild the future of our industry, which is going to be a long road, I think, and it takes a team. I didn't know we were going back a good 15, 20 years to my teen days, but I really do believe that teams get us everywhere, so I can't take all the credit. It certainly has been a very rewarding experience for me to put this BC meetings and events industry organization it's not really an organization, it's a working group, because we really are not an entity. So anyways, it's been an honor to work with the team that we've put together. Shawn's now on our working group as well, which, and Stephen Melville as well. So we've got a really good cross representation of the industry across the province. Today, what I'd like to speak to mainly is, first of all, to acknowledge the hard reality that we're all dealing with. Talk a little bit about how we'll navigate, and I think we can do a lot of that through the Q&A, so write in some questions if you could. I want to talk about the voice of our industry and get a gauge on how people are feeling about that voice. Is it being heard? And I did just allude to the fact that I personally believe it is, but I want to make sure that that's being communicated to the wider industry. A quick review of the guidelines to make sure that everybody has seen them and you're endorsing them. And if you have any questions about that, we can just, again, send the questions in, because I think having some clarity around those guidelines is going to be very important for us moving forward. And then talk about some of the traction we got with releasing those with the government, and what phase 2, which I didn't originally sign up for, but I think we're all now moving into a phase 2 to rebuild the industry. So just a quick acknowledgement to everyone who's joined the call and is here today. This has been the hardest challenge I think that any of us have faced in our careers. Would I get agreement on that? Thanks, Stephen. Yeah. So it really has led me to see the power of the resilience our industry has. Just watching that video that Dave showed at the end, it just, you know, it's this longing to be back in the seat of doing business and engaging people. But it's going to be a long road. And one of the things I just wanted to talk to people about tonight is it is important to face the hard reality that we're dealing with right now, as hopeful as we are that we might get some traction with this new phased approach that we want to present to the government. It's going to be a very hard sell. And I think companies, in order for us to have anything to come back to in 2021 and beyond, we need to make some very hard decisions for our businesses. I know that I have heartbreaking decisions, but they've been decisions that have allowed my company to stay alive and hopefully make it through the marathon to be there to ensure that we have an industry to respond when the gates open. So I think, you know, that's something, I just throw that out there. I'd love to be in discussions and a sounding board or share ideas with any of you willing to talk about that. I believe I've built a very successful plan for my company, and my team's rallied together, what's left of it. And it really is important to engage in conversation, get informed, get involved, talk about ways to stay alive, because if we don't have an industry for people to come back to our destination, you know, I think Dave would say we need to be strong so that we can fill our convention centers and fill our venues and hotels. So a topic for another day, but I think it is important to just engage in that conversation. In terms of the voice of the industry, what is it? What was it? Where does it live? When all of this hit, that's why I got involved. It's like, oh my God, it's all over the place. There's the technical services well, I don't even know if there's organizations there because it's not my world, but like all of the companies, the AV companies, lighting, sound, all of that side of things, to meeting planners, to wedding planners, to convention planners, to DMCs, to decor companies and catering. I mean, how do we bring those voices together so that we as an industry can have representation for change or influence? And that, I think, is a real problem that our industry faces. And at the same time, we all play nicely in the sandbox, especially when times get tough. So that has been a real challenge, trying to find a cohesive voice for us all to fit into. So that gave birth to this group, this working group, to represent that segment of the event world, right? Because we've got live events. We're distinguishing meetings and events separately from weddings and family gatherings, et cetera, so that, because this is an area where I think that our industry can get some traction to restart sooner than others. So as we started to learn what the environment was with government and the gathering numbers, and I guess as the virus, it leveled off a little bit. So there was times of hope. Now it seems like we're lifting again, and where do we sit? So the level of uncertainty is just, it's extremely dramatic. But bringing everybody together to get that one message started with getting these guidelines together to try and pull everyone together. So I'm just curious, how many of you have seen the guidelines? Yay, okay. All right, and while they were being developed, were you aware that they were being developed? Okay, all right, so our only avenue to communicate with our industry is through through PCMA, MPI, ILEA, Fraser Valley, FVA, yep, and I'm missing one. Okay, anyway, that's our channels to get out, but all of these organizations don't necessarily have an overarching body to represent, represent the industry as a whole. So I think just moving forward, that's something that leaders in this room need to be looking at in the future, is how are we represented? Because just a working group, is it enough? It's very unstructured to a point. I think we're doing a pretty good job, but we want to make sure that that representation is there and we can act quickly. It was pretty organic, and it's still organic, and it's responding, and we've got good people to choose from. But it is something that I think as an industry, and maybe MPI can have this as a topic of conversation moving forward, even globally, is how are we represented? Because we've taken an approach to deal with the provincial side of things, because that's what we've learned is that's where the voice and the decision needs to be heard. The decisions to open up our industry are going to be made provincially, just because that's how the provincial health office works. But nationally, we also need a voice. I almost think that our provincial voice through the channels that we have right now is stronger and more direct than the voice of the meetings and events industry is nationally. I have been having some conversations on that, and I'm just like, oh my God, why are we not represented? And I do think we're represented, but not to the degree I think we are positioned here in BC. Anyway, so really, I just wanted to talk about that voice, and it's important to me to know that your companies and all of you online, I don't know how many we have online, how many people have joined us, but it is important that all of you feel represented by the work that we're doing, and I encourage people to reach out. I've got people who've offered to help, who are doing a little bit of research on the side for us, helping us just navigate all the breadth of information that's out there. So get involved, reach out. It is important for us to all have one cohesive message, which I just wanted to, my cohesive message on having one voice, a clear message, and an intentional strategy. Those are the three ingredients to making sure that our message gets to government, which is why I know some of you in the room and online may have seen my blood pressure rise with multiple pronged approaches trying to hit media and hit government. It really is important that we communicate and make sure that any messages we have when we're talking to media, we're sending letters to whoever, that they're aligned. And that just means we need a level of communication and engagement between all of us. I could go on forever, but I won't. So if we could just touch on the guidelines that we put out there. We were able to develop these guidelines with a Safer Operations Working Group made up of representatives from the PHO and the BC Centre for Disease Control. So we really were, as well as WorkSafe BC. So we were able to get some really good feedback. They were designed to be very high level. And a lot of you may say, well, it doesn't involve temperature checks and it doesn't have PPE, for example, in there. We really wanted to keep things achievable because this was going to be a framework for us to then be able to go to government and get some traction on things. So we needed to keep things somewhat simple, but also enough, but only enough, that it met their expectations and requirements to have healthy meetings. So really, we were quite surprised at the level of simplicity, really, that we needed to have. So it's wear a mask if you can't social distance. design your events to social distance, and use good hygiene. Wash your hands, use hand sanitizer. It really is that simple, even though it's 30 some odd pages. But that's what our PHO is looking for. So there may be questions about why it didn't go into detail. We're not about to be giving you your individual company plans. So that's why it says it is relatively general and achievable. A very interesting point that did come up was the BC Centre for Disease Control representative had called us after we were about to release, and said, take out the section on PPE. They do not feel that PPE needs to be part of this because people aren't using it properly unless you're in healthcare. Another interesting point, I know we've got visors and masks here, and you'll notice in the guidelines it says visors and masks, not just one or the other. Masks is really what was recommended. Visors help protect you even more, but they're not helpful for other people. So there is some really good information in there that we may not have thought of, that we got feedback from those three bodies, which were able to round everything out and hopefully make it a sellable support for our next phase. One of the points that we put in there that really resonated with government, who the Ministry of Tourism and Deputy Minister of Labor, who reviewed our guidelines, was how we identified how our industry is prepared for a restart. It's the way we do business. We work with a level of service providers that are experienced. We're professionals. Most of us belong to organizations that are regulated. We have spaces that we can use to allow for social distancing. The design and professionalism that we have to lend to the events as they're being developed. Contact tracing is a huge component of it, and they're controlled environments. We know who's on the attendee list. These are all of these unique attributes of corporate meetings and business events that we can use to single out the meetings and incentives as part of the overall event industry that might allow us to open a little bit earlier, we're hoping. So anyway, that's just something that we're going to focus on. So I encourage you to have a quick little read. There's 9 points in the document on that. David, if you can move forward on that. And then to the next slide would be great. So just in terms of the purpose of the guidelines, we introduced these as the framework to demonstrate, first of all, just obviously to bring the industry together, to share a set of standard recommendations that met provincial requirements and the health orders. We wanted to get these out to the industry so that we could start adhering to these set of guidelines to prove competency in our industry, hopefully to government who will listen to our voice. Create alignment in the industry, the wider industry, which is meaning the exhibitions and the conventions, which we're not speaking to in these guidelines, live events, festivals, sporting and entertainment events, so that at least we're speaking the same language in terms of what those protocols are for gatherings, and then provide this framework on which we will build for future advocacy. Once we submitted these to the industry, and I thank all of the associations for getting that out to the masses, it did reach the Ministry of Tourism, who felt that there were some compelling points in there that might allow for some traction for us to have a case, as Walt mentioned under Section 43, which would allow us to provide a proposal to the government that would ask for a variance to the health order with the mandatory 50-person maximum on gatherings. So making a case specific for that industry, that we can achieve those, the expectations of that health order while exceeding those numbers. So that's the next step of working beyond, the traction we got is going to allow us to go to the government with proposals to try and restart the industry. So David, if you want to just move to the next slide, the working group, I'll just go through that. People can read that while I finish talking. Anyway, so I think just to demonstrate that the work we did on that, it was very well received. It's made its, I think in terms of across the country, we're the first province to release a detailed set of guidelines to that level. So I think in terms of our country getting back and getting the doors open, we need support of other provinces to do the same. But our next step is going to be this phase 2 approach, putting the proposal together for government, for the provincial government, and seeing how it lands. There's a letter that's going to go out in the next few days that just outlines those, the rationale around it, and hopefully we'll get some traction. But I think it's going to be a very, very long wait. I think our industry needs to be patient. We need to stand together and support each other through the hardest times that I think this industry's ever faced. But I feel positive. I feel that we are resourceful enough to find other ways within the 50-person maximum to prove the competency using these guidelines that we've laid out. We need our industry to do that in the meantime. So I encourage all of us to find ways within the restrictions that we have right now to get busy and try and get some business going. I think, again, it's gonna need conversation. We've surprisingly have 2 pieces of decent business in the final quarter of this year, which we didn't think was going to happen. It is local and hyper local, as Dave was saying, but I think we've got to dig deep and try and stay alive. So that's it for me. I really would love to open up to questions about specifics around that, advocacy, our voice, the guidelines themselves, and then next steps. But again, it takes a team and it takes all of us as an industry to pull together and make it happen. It will, just at some point in the future.
Thanks, Joanne. I know like we're kind of already over the time that we have, but I do hope that we can kind of get through a few of the kind of the top questions that we have in Slido, and we're still open for questions. So if you have, please keep submitting them. The first question, I think let's just go straight to Dave, because it's actually a very direct question, and unfortunately, I don't think it will be a very positive answer coming out. Dave, what do you foresee the next 6 months will look like for our industry, especially in light of the recent outbreak in BC?
Yeah, as Joanne said, we need to be patient. I think the next 6 months are going to continue to be very challenging. We were hoping that going through this cancellation and this rebook process that we have in 2020, we hoped it would be a 2020 thing. The reality is it's not just going to be a 2020 thing. We're already talking with too many clients, unfortunately, that want to look at postponing or canceling or moving their major events in the first half of 2021, some in the second half of 2021. So it's going to be a tough go for sure. I think we all wish we had a crystal ball right now. Nobody does. Things change, as Joanne said, things change day by day. If you're looking at the news, Ontario changed their maximum numbers today. Quebec's changing them October 1st. They're a moving target right now, and unfortunately going the other way. There was optimism UK was a great example. They were allowing industry events, the trade shows, exhibitions to almost go ahead with maximum numbers. But the next 6 months are going to be a challenge. From a overall tourism perspective, Walt alluded to this a few times, is that this is the time of year when tourism operators start to slow down. I think the stat, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Walt, 70 to 75% of revenue of most of the tourism operators across the province is made in those 4 months of the summer. And now we're heading into a slower season. If you asked me a year ago that, do you think, Dave, ever any of the hotels in Vancouver would close? I would think, no, you're crazy. We may have major hotels that will be closed over the winter. And that's just baffles me. It's unheard of that something like that would happen, but the occupancy, the business levels may not be there. So long answer, sorry, Shawn, but it's going to be a tough go for the next 6 to 8 months, probably.
Understand. And that's actually a good segue to kind of the next question. And I actually would like Joanne to answer this, and maybe we'll chipping in, because it's actually an interesting question. How do you think we can, or we should, differential meeting and event industry needs from hospitality and tourism? Because we are comprehensive at some point, but also quite unique and different needs.
The differentiate them?
Yeah, should we, or can we?
In terms of meetings and events, I'm thinking of differentiating who we are in terms of an argument to restart our industry. Absolutely, we need to differentiate who we are to the government, so that we're not seen as the convention that is bringing in 1,500 people, or the festivals and the types of events that have public. They can't social distance because, you know, people don't necessarily follow rules like our delegates do, because they're on an agenda, they work for a company, they're in a controlled environment. That's an argument we absolutely will be making to be considered different. But in terms of our different needs, that's something, Walt, you can speak to this, but I have felt that there's a lot of people who want the meetings and events or industry within tourism, because that's an interesting place for us to sit. There's some argument that makes, that many people feel that we should be sitting under, you know, we're an economic driver. We're not necessarily sitting in tourism as an economic driver, but we're a different industry at times. But I've felt through the work I've been doing is we really do fit in tourism, and we just need a stronger voice within tourism, because the needs that we have, we've got a lot of small companies in our industry. There is a parallel within tourism, and I think that the needs are similar in that businesses need wage subsidies. We need some kind, we need liquidity. We need to keep businesses alive. And I just can't see how governments would single out the meetings and events world from tourism or from any other industry in this particular situation, which makes it very difficult for us to, you know, feel something's being done for us, but it is.
Well, it's even hard to convince somebody who is unfamiliar with the meetings industry or somebody that comes in for a business meeting, for example. You could be 2 people coming in for a company meeting. It's hard to convince people that they're actually a tourist. They're here on business, first and foremost, but they're a visitor, and they're classified as a tourist. We count them as a tourist. So very much so, we need to be within the tourism and hospitality umbrella. And yes, it drives a lot of business in other areas, and there's a domino effect, obviously, of the meetings business, that, you know, the supplier that delivers food, and there's a huge ecosystem around the meetings and events business that may not be considered tourism, but most definitely we should be, and that's the umbrella where we fit.
Yeah. And to speak to the needs, I think I don't think, and I've looked quite critically at that our needs are very aligned with what the tourism industry as a whole is.
Great.
That answers the question.
I think so. I hope so. I think the next question will be great if any one of you can also answer, which is also a quite important question. With so many people in the industry right now, they are furloughed or unemployment. How would you recommend that they keep involved and what kind of thing they can do? How about Dave?
Sure, MPI is a great example to stay connected, even though you might be on a temporary or unfortunately it may be a full-time layoff. Stay connected with the industry associations as best you can. Keep up on what's going on in the industry. We've gone through this in our organization, sadly, and you can really tell some of the individuals are really making the effort to stay out there, stay active, stay informed. People taking courses that they've never had a chance to take before. People doing professional development they've never had a chance to do before. Networking as best they can virtually. I think there's lots of ways you can do that for sure.
Anyone else?
I want to keep people connected to our sector. You know that the province has introduced a program whereby they'd like to take tourism and hospitality employees and perhaps shift them into healthcare and so on. The notion of that is really good, don't get me wrong. However, we've had a chronic labor shortage for many years in our industry, and we're desperate for people. Now that we've invested so much time and money and offered benefits and so on to tourism employees, they may be on furlough now, but we're going to need those folks again because they're highly skilled. They like the industry, they know the industry. We can't afford to lose them to another sector because once we do, they're not coming back. We can't control that, obviously, but we need those folks in future. So to have them tethered even to those that have been furloughed, if those running organizations can make sure that they're in touch with those folks and keeping them engaged and informed, et cetera, we've got a better chance of welcoming them back once travel resumes in earnest than hopefully losing them to another sector.
Just my input on that is we are a highly skilled industry, and a lot of our skills are transferable. So I think that really is important, whether it's a business or whether it's an individual. How can your skills and talents help another industry or be put to good use in doing something else, whether it's for the interim or long term. I love the tagline of reimagine, redesign, and reconnect. This has been a time for myself, my friends, our laid off employees, our existing employees, to think about where we really want to be and what we want to be doing. And now is the time to think that if you've always wanted to be an artist or a singer or whatever, or start your own business or you know, move to another company, now's the time to figure out what that future is going to look like, because this industry is going to come back very different. I believe it's going to be a complete new rebirth of this industry at some point in 2020. It's not going to look the same. So I do think people need to get real with that and figure out what the next move is. I've lots of wonderful people who've just lost jobs, mainly from the hotel industry, have moved into the tech sector. They've moved into that, you know, passion that they've always wanted to. But we know that this is like Hotel California, and you can never get out of this industry. So, you know, I think just really explore and have conversations with people in this room about opportunities, because coming up, there's going to be a bit of a land of opportunity when things do reopen. So it's time to think about that now.
Thanks, Joanne. Just cautions on the time. I know we're already over. So for those questions who haven't been answered, Nicole, if you can collecting them and sending to me, I'm happy to be the one who distribute to the three panelists accordingly, if that makes sense, and we'll get back to MPI and they can maybe send back to the audience. I think that last question is actually a good closing basically for the meeting, but any last word? Okay, then I think that is a good sign for me, especially for those who are watching online. Thank you for staying in front of your laptop for this long. I know it's not very easy. And thanks again for everyone, including that who are in the room today with this panel. I hope you find the information helpful and also bring us some hope for the next little while. And thanks again for inviting us. And I guess we'll just throw the stage back to David. Thank you.
Thanks, Shawn.
No. Which direction?
You guys can stay. We'll make it quick. So I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for attending tonight in person and online. You know, at MPI, we have a saying that when we meet, we change the world. And I think the content that we got tonight is going to help us influence our world as we go forward, because it is definitely going to be a different world. The other thing too is, you know, as Joanne was mentioning, that as an industry, we're developing one message, many voices. And so we need to be consistent and work together. Please go to the MPI website, download the guidelines, endorse them. It would be great. MPI has given us, you guys our full support on this. It's an excellent initiative. So thank you so much for doing that. And as we wrap up, I'm just gonna have to put my glasses on again so we can thank our sponsors so I don't leave anybody out. PC20 for the heat sensing equipment, Bell, BBW for the COVID safety ambassadors, Encore for the amazing AV setup tonight, and of course the spectacular Vancouver Trade and Convention Centre for the food and beverage in this amazing venue. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Yeah, they deserve a round of applause, all the event sponsors. And I will close out by just going through our annual sponsors: Meetings Prince George, Loungeworks, Effective Consulting, Foster Walker Gifts of Distinction, Helijet, Spets Association Management, NASCO Staffing Solutions, ePly Event Registration, mybadges.com, John Benjamin Photography, and Vision Event Photography. And we invite you to step next door and enjoy the Living Laboratory. Thank you.